Well, thank you. Let's go ahead and get the session started. It is just a minute past the hour, and we'll continue to have other folks join, but in the interest of time, we'll go ahead and start this presentation. We want to thank you for participating in our presentation today titled CMMC is right around the corner. It seems like it is coming very soon here, but we're going to show you some ways in which you can help get yourself prepared and not make it as difficult a process as you may think. My name is Tom Leahy. I am the head of sales and business development with SureShield. I am have attending with me Chandi Bilagu. He is our CTO and the brains behind the software that we're going to show you a little bit later on in the presentation here today. We're going to go ahead and talk a little bit about the current compliance requirements, where things are standing as of today with CMMC and the Cyber AB, what you as a company should be doing today and getting ready for this in the future. We'll talk a little bit about technology that SureShield provides that can help ease the burden of this compliance. We'll give you a little demonstration of that solution. We'll take questions, and then for those of you who have interest, we will offer the ability to trial out our solutions. We do have a diverse group of folks here today, both suppliers to the Department of Defense, subcontractors as well, all who will need to meet these requirements, as well as RPOs and providers who will be helping you get prepared, and even C3POs who will be doing audits. Our solutions are available and useful to all of those types of entities. But really, where are we at today? First of all, I want to thank you for joining us on Valentine's Day. I hope that we can get through this quickly and show that you're going to have a little bit more time to be with your significant other today as well, hopefully, and feel a little bit better about how you're going to meet these compliance requirements. I will note that this presentation, you will get, for those of you who are here, you will get copies of the content of the presentation, as well as the recording of this particular webinar. So really, given last year, we have not seen to date this year a update from the Cyber AB. We should expect that they will have another town hall that they will be ready to roll out here pretty soon. But it appears that things are continuing to move forward rather aggressively to meet the timelines of implementing this rule. As many of you know, there is going to be a new process that any supplier who is supplying services to the Department of Defense is going to have new compliance requirements and perhaps audits that they're going to need to meet in order to bid on contracts, to get paid, and in some cases to continue on with existing contracts that may be coming up. They did last year roll out the assessment process, kind of what that process will look like for those of you who may have to go through an audit. There are suppliers who have proactively begun to conduct those and have this, CMMC third-party C3PAOs come in to do that, to get out ahead of this. We're expecting that close to 80,000 of the suppliers in the DIB are going to have to go through a level 2, and very likely that could require a C3PAO audit. They're going to hopefully here in the near future define what organizations will have to go through that and what won't. But it does seem to be that anyone that meets a level 2 requirement is going to very likely have to go through some kind of a third-party audit. And as you know, they're continuing to enforce the NIST 800-171 requirements. And we'll be expecting, for those of you who may be at a level 1, a higher level of sign-off within your organization, attesting that you are meeting the proper requirements. And it seems like things are continue to be on track for that review by the middle of this year, early part of this year. So really, it's very important that you as an organization get started on your assessments if you have not done so already, that you conduct a NIST 800-171 assessment, or have a third party or someone, your MSPs or whoever you're working with, making sure that you're meeting the proper requirements. And it's been advised that anyone that's involved in the DIB, and really any company should be doing this, should be doing what they call vulnerability assessments. You want to get a good understanding of what your network environment looks like and where you may have vulnerabilities. It just continues, as we know, to each day we're hearing new things about hostile nations threatening our security. We've just had the issues with the balloons, the quote unquote weather balloons floating over our country and really trying to steal a lot of significant information from us. And more of those sightings are happening all the time. They've issued what they would call the arms up or the shields up warnings, because they are expecting with things, particularly with nations like China, Iran, obviously with the war in Ukraine, that the level of cyber attacks are going to continue to increase. And as such, it only makes sense that the Department of Defense is really actually going to even further accelerate the enforcement of these requirements, given the significant nature of what this means to the security of our country. So what do you need to do as a provider to meet the requirements? The preparation and ongoing oversight is going to require that you have an audit against the CMMC and NIST 800-1 frameworks. One of the things, as you know, that they did after adopting the CMMC 2.0 is they did somewhat, I would say, standardize and simplify the process so that those of you that are handling CUI data will literally just be following the same requirements that you had with NIST 800-171. The controls are the same. The evidence that you're going to need to provide around those continues to be the same. Where this got, a higher level of scrutiny was making sure that there could be third parties who are going to come in and validate that for you. In the past and today, you are required to complete a NIST 800-171 assessment, to submit that score to the SPRS, and included with that, your plan of action and milestone and your SSP should be there. And keep in mind, this is not a static one-time type process, that if there are things that need to be improved or fixed, you have to fix those and show that those have been fixed and resubmit that information. And on a go forward, all organizations are either going to have to do this at minimally in a yearly basis, and or going through that assessment audit. So you'll need to have those components in place today. You'll need to have defined policies and procedures that relate to this NIST and CMMC framework. You'll need to do proper work and identification of where your controlled unclassified information lies, and also show that you have the proper security controls in place to protect that information. And lastly, you'll need to, of course, schedule and get ready for those assessments. So what has and hasn't changed, or what should you as a company be doing today? We know that CMMC is going to be implemented. Again, all the signs are there that they're accelerating, getting this to this next phase of the audit process. And again, if you are a level 2 provider, you're going to most likely have to go through that. And they will be asking for a lot of information ahead of that audit time. So the more you have in place, the more you have understanding of what controls are implemented, what may not, and most importantly, having the evidence to support that. There'll be quite a bit that will be asked of you ahead of time prior to you actually having that audit done. You're still required to do the submission of your NIST 800-171 score to the SPRS. And really, if you are a contractor or a subcontractor, you're probably seeing more coming from your primes telling you that you need to to have this in place and validate that you have done that. And you're going to have to do that at least minimally yearly. Other things that you should be doing, really, you should be taking time to determine your maturity levels. You know, if you handle any controlled unclassified information, you'll minimally be at a level 2. And then most likely that's going to require that, as we said, that certification process. And then I'm just pointing out some of the controls that are in the NIST 800-171 framework that talk about locating, evaluating, and protecting your CUI data. You'll also need to make sure that you have good cyber hardening processes in place. And again, there are controls in the frameworks that require and specify that you should be doing vulnerability assessments. You should be doing scans of your network, whether that's with your own resources or whether you're having your providers do that for you. You should validate that your providers are doing this, and not just doing it, but demonstrating that they're remediating vulnerabilities. So if there are areas that are identified as high risk, you should have an action plan in place to correct, remediate, and then again follow through and update on those. So before I go on to our next component in terms of how SureShield can help you with this process, we just wanted to take a very quick poll to get an idea within the group, with those that are participating here today. How many of you have actually conducted already a NIST 800-171 assessment and submitted that to the SPRS? And also, if you haven't, or if you have, is it something that can be easily updated? And I mentioned that because a lot of folks have done what I would call static reviews. They've used Excel sheets, or they've used information to kind of give them a viewpoint as to where they are right now, but they don't necessarily have good tools or good ways to actually update that in a very easy and continuous basis. And we're going to talk to you a little bit about how SureShield can help you with that, so that you have kind of what we might call a continuous compliance profile. Well, great. It looks like actually half of the participants here have not completed an assessment. About 30% have. And of those, most of you, if you have, it's telling me that there are, you don't have a lot of good tools that allow you to update that very well. So we're going to hopefully show you how we might be able to help you with that. And for those who have not conducted that assessment, I would very much encourage you to begin that process, because regardless if you are servicing today, you're going to need to submit that score. And given where things are going right now with the implementation of CMMC, you're going to have that information in place, and it's going to be asked of you along with the evidence that you're going to need to provide. So how can we as SureShield, or how are we helping suppliers and those who are servicing the supplier industry? We've added to our, what we would call our compliance assessment tool, which we're going to show you, supplemental guidance content to help simplify understanding what the compliance documentation requirements may be. In our compliance suite, we do crosswalks to really all the different compliance frameworks that we work with. I'm going to specifically speaking to CMMC and NIST. We have done direct crosswalks so that you can get yourself prepared today and meet the current requirements without having to do any additional updating to meet the CMMC requirements. We've mapped them both to what they would call the level 1 and the level 2 controls. So really, no matter whether you're answering CMMC related audit questions or NIST related audit questions, they are the same. There's no need for you to do that twice. It's simply clicking a button and synchronizing your responses. That also will bring along all of the evidence that you may need to provide that support and backup. We've also packaged with this all the standardized policies and procedures to help meet those various domain requirements, and then give you the ability to modify, update those for your organization as well. We've additionally added new technology or new services that can do what we call a compliance scan. We look at certain areas within your environment where we can take data from those and be able to actually populate what we would call evidence proof sheets that can back up your answers to a particular meeting, a particular compliance requirement. Very valuable and very useful and really super efficient. And we've also automated the system security plan process for SPRS. So you'll see when we go into some of the demonstration aspects how our tools can take data and then actually also generate all the required documentation that you may need to meet those requirements. So how can SureShield help your organization, or if you are an organization that's servicing multiple providers? As I mentioned, we also have this white labeled so that the platform can be used to conduct this for multiple companies, if indeed that's what you are doing. So in many ways, to help meet these requirements, obviously, we can help you harmonize and do the crosswalk and collect the data in a continuous fashion for you to see at any given point where you stand on your compliance requirements, what gaps you may have, and then how to actually close those gaps to ultimately meet the requirements. We have very simple and easy to implement what we call continuous vulnerability scanning tools. We leverage some best in breed class third-party scanning utilities, but we've enabled them in a way that makes it very simple and easy for an organization to implement, deploy, and get the necessary information they need to know where their risk profiles are. We also have data and software that can help you, their endpoint solutions, identify COA data in your environment. So if you have marked data, we can very quickly run that utility and help you understand where that information may be residing, and then help you to put the proper protections on that data to assure that it cannot get stolen, hacked, or go to the wrong individuals. And then lastly, as I mentioned, we provide, all of these provide reporting utilities that will help you meet all the documentation requirements that you have today. And most likely, if you are going through a third-party audit, we'll have to provide that to the C3PAO, who will be doing that audit of your organization as well. So it will provide the necessary information to help you expedite going through that process. And having that data in place up front and ready is going to make the going through that process that much smoother and most likely less expensive for you. So we do these under the auspices of three different compliance, or what I would call domain areas that we help with. Our ComplyShield solution helps you do any kind of compliance assessment. I'm going to just touch briefly in a slide to let you know that it goes beyond NIST and CMMC. Many of you may have other compliance requirements like SOC or HIPAA or whatever, and we provide solutions that are crosswalk to help you with that as well. So really reducing time in doing that process. Our Security Shield has solutions underneath of it at the Security Shield Prime level. That is our continuous vulnerability scanning, remediation, and gap analysis utility. I'm going to give you a brief view into how that works. And our Security Shield DLP is the solution that will go and identify CUI data and help you put proper protections on that data. Lastly, we also have a suite of solutions under what we call Integrity Shield. And those are quite useful today, particularly not only with the DoD, but if you're doing any type of government business. You all know that you are with the McCain Act and under 889B, you need to provide attestation that you are not using any banned primary telecommunication information There are 5 Chinese entities and subsidiaries of those. We can expect that there'll be more that will be added, where you're forbidden from having them in your environment if you want to participate in any kind of federal government contract. So it's even broader than the Department of Defense. And we have solutions that leverage actually our scanning utilities to help very quickly identify whether you may have that in your environment, so you can take the proper actions to eliminate that as well to meet your requirements. And as I mentioned, our compliance suite, this is just a basic overview of all the different compliance components we have today. So our utilities can be used not just for meeting your NIST and CMMC requirements, but other compliance requirements you may have as an organization. So with that, I'm going to pause briefly, and I'm going to just give you a brief demonstration of the software solutions that we have to help you meet these requirements. And I'm going to pull that up. And Shandi, if you can just validate that you're able to see.
We can see.
Okay, so what I've done is I've signed in to the SureShield software. And everything that we provide is given in what we would call kind of a dashboard view, so that you can get kind of quick information on where you may stand depending on what it is you may be using within the environment. We also, if you are using multiple products, give you that dashboard view across the different product offerings that you have. So I've come in as this customer, we're calling it the customer demo. And in my dashboard, it's showing me the different types of controls and policies that I have in my environment to help meet various types of compliance requirements. In this case, I have it set up and for me to conduct and be able to monitor my CMMC and NIST requirements. And again, they will even give you specific information at what we might call a compliance level, so that you can even drill down. For instance, if you just wanted to look at the 14 non-compliant controls, it would take you directly to those. So above here, you see things related to compliance. As I mentioned, we package policies, and we actually give you the ability to look at how you're performing from a policy level as well. And then down below here, this particular client is also utilizing what we would call our scanning and vulnerability utilities. So it's helping them understand what assets are being scanned, what the severity of any kind of risk we have to those assets, what the vulnerabilities may be, and then most importantly, telling them how to go about and remediate to reduce that. If I wanted to just go into taking a look and actually beginning to make it simple to conduct the assessment, you'll see it takes me into the various controls. And the reason you saw 220 to begin with is that CMMC and NIST each are 110. They are, for the most part, the exact same controls. The only difference with them is really how they are basically the control ID that they have as it relates to NIST or CMMC. So again, letting people know that they really only need to go through one, and then they can go ahead and map to those different areas. We provide a lot of flexibility for you to filter your information. So if I just wanted to come in, for instance, and only look at CMMC level 1 controls, you can see I've filtered on those, and it's taking me down to what they call the 17 basic cyber hygiene controls that I need to have in place. And that it allows me to look at those and actually go into the process of reviewing and collecting the information I need to answer these questions. I'll take these off, and I'm just going to open up we'll just go into the NIST controls, and we'll just start by going into this. So if I am going in to answer questions, it's as simple as clicking on these hyperlinks, and then it will take me to that control, the appropriate way to answer that particular control. And what a lot of our folks find very, very useful in our solutions is that we give a lot of guidance in how to interpret that particular control question, with things like what's the guidance and best practices to help with this, what's the implementation guidance, what are the policies and procedures that should be in place, supplemental guidance to help you understand what you may need to do in order to meet these requirements, and what the supporting evidences may be with that. As I mentioned as well, if it applies, if we do a compliance scan, we will actually pull that supporting evidence into here to help back up an answer to a particular question and provide that evidence. It even gives information, for instance, on survey questions you may ask of folks to help them better understand how to meet this particular control. And in the case of our solution, again, this is not, it's dynamic, meaning that at any given point in time, you can go in and look and see how you're performing. There's no need to answer every single question in order to get some reporting and progress out of them. Obviously, the more you have in place, the better you're going to have an understanding of where and what requirements you have in place or what you may need to do, but it's not necessarily to answer everything in order to get some information out of those. Again, as you can see, there's a lot of different ways that we can filter data. Our product as well is not individual, meaning it's not one person that has to do all this. We have means and ways that you can dynamically assign information to other people. So if I wanted to take these 17 controls, for instance, or all of these controls or a subset of these controls and assign them to someone else, it's as simple as assigning them to someone within the organization. You can even assign them to people outside the organization. So if you have a third party that's working with you and you need them to answer a couple questions for you, you can send those responses out to them. It will give them a secure web form that will allow them to go in and answer those questions as necessary and provide that data then back to you. You'll also notice in this area, if I had sent those out, they would show up in my request tile to let me know what requests are out there and what the status of those requests are. So as I mentioned, as you continue to gather this information, the most important thing is going to be, what does this all mean to me? And that's in our report areas that very, as I said, dynamically will go ahead and calculate and help provide you with that information you need to see where you stand, also to help you better properly evaluate what resources you may need to bring in. And again, we encourage folks, get a good first view of where you're at, because many of you may need to have an RPO or someone else come in and help you get ready for this. But it would be good for you to know kind of where those gaps are before you bring someone in to do all of that on your behalf. A better use of your time and resources and money with that. So we provide things like just basic reports on compliance. So I'm just going to say, show me at the level 2 under CMMC where I am right now based upon the answers that I currently have within this. And this gives you what we would call a basic report on compliance. You can see those, how many are compliant, what's in remediation, what's non-compliant, graphical views of what all that means, who's been answering, what the trends look like, what are the gaps identified in the remediation suggestions that we may have. Very useful. And all of our reports can be programmed, meaning you can schedule them to go out to different people or organizations or individuals on a time basis that you so choose. So as things are being updated, you would have regular updates as to where you stand. As I mentioned, we've also, for the purposes of CMMC and NIST and the DoD requirements, we have created all the documentation that you need today to submit that information to the SPURS. That includes the NIST assessment score. So you can see here, if I were to click into this and say, show me based upon the weights of all of my answers, what my score looks like at this given point in time, you can see this particular organization is at a 71. And for those of you familiar with the process, or maybe not, the best score you could get is 110. But you can have as low as a negative, I think it's 181. So there's different weighting, as you can see, to different controls. If they are not implemented, you'll get a negative weighting on those. If they are, then you do get a score of 1. So it's a little different in terms of, on the positive side, the highest you can get is a 1. But if you don't have them in place, you can get as much as a -3 or a -5. And as they begin to look at this and scrutinize this more, you can be assured that they're going to be not just looking at the fact that you submitted this information. They're going to want to see what those scores look like. Will give them a better understanding of how secure your organization really is in terms of meeting these cyber controls. And it could, ultimately have some impact on your ability to bid on new contracts or secure new contracts. Again, off of this, we also generate for you the plan of action and milestone report. So if you have particular controls that your provider or you have indicated are in the remediation process, it will generate that particular plan of action and milestone report, which gives information on what it is you're going to do to meet that requirement, when you're going to do it, and what the time frame will be and what that process will be. We've also automated the system security plan as well. So not everything that is required necessarily in the system security plan is captured in your NIST 800-171 assessment. So what we have done is actually created ways for you to easily update and provide all the additional information that's needed to do a complete system security plan. That can be things like the document revision history, what information systems you have in place, your network diagrams, your network architectures that are required as part of this. And then you can see as we get down into this, it begins to go into the practices. And those are the practices that are associated with the various controls that you are utilizing and conducting in the SureShield application. So we bring all of this together. And as I mentioned previously, one of the beauties of this solution as well is that it is a continuous tool. So anytime you make any modifications or changes to this, the system updates. We capture all the history. So you can always look at any given point in time where you stand or have stood. And you don't need to go back in and redo this all over again. So you can review what you currently have in place. And as you are implementing new changes or you're going back to make changes, it's simply coming into the solution and updating those. And regardless, anyone that's going to be involved in this process should have solutions and tools and data available to them at any given point in time. Just doing this on a one-time basis and letting it go will cause you a lot more inefficiencies. It will cause you a lot more headaches, and it most likely will cost you a lot more to do that as well. So I'm going to pause there and just mention briefly that is the compliance solution that we have called ComplyShield. And as I mentioned, ComplyShield can be utilized for a lot of different purposes beyond just this, but for purposes of our presentation today, we're showing you how it helps meet the NIST and the CMMC requirements. Now, similarly, as I mentioned, our scanning and vulnerability solution is really a web-enabled, simple to implement product that if you are doing this on your own, it's basically you launch a utility that does what we would call kind of a scan of a discovery of the assets in your environment, and that it applies to those when you run the scan. It leverages what we leverage the Rapid7 gold standard scanning solution that then goes in and looks at all the vulnerabilities that are in this national database and can tell you on your assets, on your software, what vulnerabilities you may have, what the degree of risk of those are, the severity of those, and what that would mean to you, obviously. So again, you can filter this data very easily. If I just wanted to look at my critical vulnerabilities, it would drill down to those and then show me, in this case, I'm looking at from what we call a host asset view. On those hosts, what is that particular host, what's running on it? And then if I were to click into these, it would show me over time what the vulnerabilities are that are running on this. So you can see on this particular host, or this IP, I've got 402 vulnerabilities running on it. Off of that, again, when you, and then we give a lot of simple methodologies to how you go about setting up that process. So it's, you can easily implement what we call the scanner. If you have people that are remote, you can run them a remote scanner on their laptops and allow them to sync up to your mothership so you can get a way to look at your entire environment. We do both what we call internal scanning, or things inside the network, and then we also do external. So any of your internet facing applications or devices, we run a scan on those. That does not require to download a scanner. We run a scanner in the cloud, and then again, we'll give you all of that information. And then you have a very simple way to schedule when, how often you want to, to have these run. Very flexible in terms of what assets you may want to run it on, what subnets. You may have certain ones you don't want to have vulnerable, scanning run on. So you have a lot of flexibility in determining how and why, what you're going to run on that. And then very similar, you have a lot of very powerful reports that come out of this that can help you understand at a much higher level what you may need to do to get your cyber posture much better. So I'm just going to give an example here of one called the top remediation report. And it's basing it the same on those scans that we run. Again, if you can see over here, there's a lot of different ways you can filter your data if you want to just run reports on some specific information on a particular area, maybe just on some particular assets. You have all that flexibility to do so. I'm basically running one on what we would call a top 20 remediation report. So it's asking me, hey, if I were to implement the top, the most critical remediations, what impact would that have on my overall cyber posture and my risk profile within my organization? So you can see here again, graphical views. All of these can be output to be put into other types of reports to be shared with management if need be, to help understand, where you may need to direct some resources to fix things. But it's basically telling me if I were to apply the top 20, they would get applied to 202 hosts, and I'd remediate almost 93% of the vulnerabilities and really mitigate a significant amount of risk in my organization. And again, things like this should be run on a regular basis because there are always, almost daily new vulnerabilities that are being introduced, or new threats that are being introduced into the environment. You see CISA almost daily releasing new areas that need to be focused on. So you can see this will show me kind of graphically what impact it would have if I continue to add these remediations and ultimately to get to that process. And most importantly, again, it not only tells you what those are, but how to go about doing those remediations. If you have good management tools, the timing can be done much quicker in terms of applying some of these remote management tools to help correct vulnerabilities. But ultimately, you want to know, what is it that I need to do to fix this? And we give you all that guidance that will tell you, in order to fix those, remediate those issues, here's what you need to do, and here's how you go about doing it. So with that, I'm going to pause. Lastly, I did mention that we have a solution that can help look at the CUI data you may have in your environment. This does more than just CUI, but I'm just giving you a very quick view into what we call our SureShield Data Loss Protection solution, DLP. And you can see here, again, it's showing me where sensitive data may be lying. It's an endpoint that will go out on endpoints and identify critical data that may be sitting in different areas within your environment. If I were to go into that data, it's going to tell me, what that data is, where it resides, and what kind it is. So in this case, as I mentioned, this goes beyond just CMMC, but for instance, if I wanted to just look at the CUI data within this environment, it's telling me how that's classified, what devices it's lying on. And then it would allow me to go and look at those devices and figure out how we're going to put the proper protections on that as well. So that is how SureShield solutions are being utilized both by providers. We have a lot of what we call partners that are leveraging our platform and helping utilize this for multiple clients that they're working with. We do have a lot of suppliers who are working with us as well, who have resources in place to help with this, or they want to get started with ComplyShield to help them get a good view as to where they're at, to then go about bringing in the proper resources they may need in order to meet and be prepared for this audit that will be coming, and or submitting that data to the SPRS currently to meet the NIST requirements. So again, we help leverage technology to make this process easier, to help you meet your compliance requirements, and really to help protect your valuable information, not only protecting your company, but obviously protecting those within the ecosystem you're working with as we continue to have more threats to our sovereignty. And lastly, these help you protect the revenue for the business that you currently have, and hopefully put you in good places for the business that you intend to bid on in the future. And this process is moving forward rather quickly. If you haven't done your assessments now, you should be getting either a provider to help you with that, leverage our technology to help you with that, because if you do plan on participating in this down the road, this year, you are definitely going to be in a position to have to at least either submit data and or be prepared to begin an assessment. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and pause here. And please, if you have questions, go to the Q&A section of this. And we are going to now open it up. Actually, I wanted to take another brief poll and allow you to, if folks here are interested in trialing our software, we are making that available to you. I'll keep this open for a bit. Should you have an interest in trialing out the ComplyShield or any of our other solutions, please go ahead on in here and answer in the trial offer section. We will be reaching out to you. Folks from SureShield will reach out to you and help get you set up to go ahead and trial that solution. You get it for a month at no cost. Should you continue to utilize the solution, it's at a very, we believe, reasonable, cost-effective rate, and all of any and all the data that you may have captured in that process will continue to be available to you on a go-forward basis. So with that, let's go ahead and go to the Q&A. It looks like there were several questions that have already been answered by folks participating on the SureShield side. Chandi, I don't know if there's any ones here that you want to re-answer or at least expand upon in terms of some of the questions that were asked by the folks participating.
Yeah, one of the questions that may be interesting for everyone is, what is the minimum score required on for SPRS?
Mm-hmm.
So I answered that, but I want to elaborate on that.
Sure. And we probably are going to start seeing more of that come out. I know in the initial, when NIST 800-171 was first rolled out, the requirement was just to complete it and submit a score. And again, sometimes those are just to get people to start doing things. You can be relatively assured that they're going to certainly want to make sure that the scores are in a positive area. We've heard some folks say that scores of, above 80 are going to be required, but there's none of that has been officially validated. And again, when you get into the process of having to go through an audit, there's going to be certain things you're going to have in place. There are controls going forward. They haven't indicated what those are just yet, but there will be controls going forward that you will not be allowed to put on a plan of action and milestone report, meaning you will need to have them in place in order to even begin to go through the process. So the sooner you basically have a good understanding of where you stand on all of these controls, the better you'll be prepared to understand what might need to be done next. And Chandi, I'm going to just, if you could go ahead and explain a little bit again on how what we call the compliance scan components work again as well. I think that would be helpful. You maybe can articulate that better than I did.
Yes, so most of the time compliance requires a lot of evidence to be provided. And some of this evidence can be automated. That is, we can actually gather that information from your IT environment and present it alongside the relevant controls to say this is the evidence that is gathered, and that can be kept updated automatically. So that's a great help for you to actually stay up to date and stay abreast of all the things. And whenever it finds information that actually puts you out of compliance, it lets you basically take corrective actions to bring it back into compliance. And all these trends are part of the reporting that we provide.
Excellent. And it really helps with the efficiencies around this process because, again, it's not as simple as answering a question. If you're answering something implemented or you're indicating something is implemented, they are going to want to see the evidence that that has been implemented as well. And actually, I'm going to just come back out for a minute. And one thing that I think I failed to point to show briefly as well, and I'll do this very quickly. Again, we've got the offer still open. So any of you that are still on and have an interest in this, please go ahead and indicate so. I just wanted to point out quickly, I mentioned policies as well, that all of your controls need to be supported in answers to controls by implemented policies or policies that you have in place. And that is something else that we also package as part of our system. So we package controls, standardized templates related to all the various policies. You have the ability to go in and review these. You can add your own if you already have them in place. You can update, you can modify them but we basically white label them to you and make them available to you. A lot of time and effort can go into this. And once you've begun that process, you can even view where you stand from a policy perspective. So for instance, in this access control policy, I can see that we've deemed it non-compliant because there are 22 controls that relate to that policy. 18 of those controls we have implemented, and there's 3 of these that we haven't. If I wanted to, or in one that has not even been answered. So if I wanted to, I could very quickly go and look at what were those particular controls and where are they at? And it's telling me that it's in a remediation process and therefore this policy is not completely compliant. Now, just briefly, if I were to go into this to show you, you could see this is where it pulls up that policy. It shows you the controls that are mapped to that policy. And again, if I needed to update this or edit it, I can do so. And I have all that in place for me as well. That comes part and parcel. The policies come along with the ComplyShield product offering as well.
So there's a question, Tom. We are a small company with 6 to 10 people in office. Is our network too small to be worth your while?
The answer is no. I mean, it doesn't matter if you are participating in this process, then you need to meet these requirements. So we have companies that work with us that are hundreds, if not thousands of employees, we have a few of our customers that are, basically a couple of people that have contracts with the Department of Defense. So company size does not make a difference. And I think you'll find that from the ComplyShield standpoint of this, we have a very cost-effective methodology for you to help meet these requirements. So again, for that particular question, if you want to learn more, please do reach out to us and we can help. If you're not ready to start a trial, we can have a discussion and show you what you might want to do to help you do this easier. Any other questions? If not, we have got you bought a little time before the end of the hour here. Again, we'll leave the trial offer open for another few minutes. I see a number of you have indicated yes. For those of you who are interested in that, you will be getting an email from us with a calendar area on it where you can pick a time that works well for you to get your trial set up. So please look out for that email. Please check your spam occasionally. Sometimes those can go into a spam folder, but you should, by the end, within the next 2 hours, we usually have all of the follow-up messages out to those who have participated here today. So keep an eye out for that. If you are interested, you'll please go in and find time on the calendar. It works. For those of you who have indicated no, again, the content and the webinar information will be sent out to you. We thank you for participating. And for those who have indicated maybe later, the same. You'll get a message. And certainly we will obviously, as SureShield, continue to keep you apprised of events that we have going on, as well as any updates around this, because we should be seeing a lot more activity and the implementation of this year coming. So I want to thank you all for participating with us today. Best of luck to your companies, and please, best to keep yourselves well protected. And with that, we'll go ahead and close out the presentation. I will keep this open just briefly for another minute or two, should anyone else come in and want to indicate interest in the trial. Otherwise, thank you everyone for joining.